Here I'm going to go over how to design this part. I've gone over this in class, but this video is meant to be a reference in case you get stuck. We're going to use Autodesk Inventor to design the part. You can see that it's a 1/4 inch thick. The length of each of these sides is 2¼ inches. This angle is 135 degrees between the two sides here. It's 3/4 of an inch tall, or 0.75 inches. And then we have these holes. They're 0.17 inch in diameter, and they're spaced at a 1/2 inch apart. However, the first hole is a 1/4 inch from the edge. There's also a 1/8 inch fillet on each of the corners to round those off. And also the holes are centered on the model. So going to Inventor, the first thing that we're going to do is click New. This opens up a new window, and we're going to do design with a standard IPT. So we're going to select this, which is just a standard part for Inventor, and we'll hit Create. And the first thing after this is we're going to create a 2D sketch. So click here. Not on the drop down. The drop down gives other options. So we have also a 3D sketch, and we wanted a 2D sketch. And so then it gives these 3 coordinate planes to choose from. I typically just click on the XY plane, although it really doesn't matter for this part. So now clicking on the plane, this gives us a flat surface to draw our sketch on. And there's many ways to design this part, and I'm going to just do it in one method, demonstrate one way to do this, but I'm going to try to maximize some of the symmetry of the part. So I'm going to first draw just a horizontal line. You can start at the origin to do that, but you don't have to. And so I'm going to draw a horizontal line, making sure that it is horizontal and not angled up like this. And I'm going to click once, and then I'm just going to go up and click again. Notice I can actually type in the dimensions while I'm drawing the lines, but I wanted to show you how to type in the dimensions after you create them. So I can click again, and then it's still wanting to create more lines. I'm going to hit Escape. So then I can go to the dimension button here. D is the shortcut for dimension, or you can hit that button. We can see that it is now depressed. And we can click on this line and move our mouse down, and then click again and type in a dimension. And that's 2.25 inches. Notice that the part, it kind of disappears a little bit because it's gotten larger. So I'm zooming out using my scroll mouse. You can also zoom in a different way. You can actually click a window. Let's say you have this, you can make a window around the part like this, and it will make that window full size. And so that's a different way to zoom. There's also other features here. We can click this hand that allows us to pan back and forth or up and down. And then there's the orbit button that allows us to orbit like this. You can also play around with the cube here to get different views. You can drag the cube or click on different faces or different vertices. To get out of the orbit or anything like this, we can hit the Escape button. So the next thing I want to do is dimension this side. I don't have to hit D again because the button is still depressed. And so when I click on it and move my mouse, notice that it wants to make a horizontal distance, or if I move my mouse over here, it wants to measure the vertical distance. I want the distance of along the hypotenuse here. And so what we can do is right click, and on the drop down, find Align, and that will give us the dimension along this line. And so I can click again and then type in the dimension at 2.25 inches. What I want to do now is set the angle at 135 degrees. And so if I just click here on this line, click on this line, and then move my mouse, I can then type in the angle. And now we have these two lines set at the correct length and the correct angle. What I'm going to do now, instead of just trying to draw the rest, I'm going to actually use a little shortcut with Offset tool. If I hit Offset and click here, you can see that I can create basically an offset of what I've already drawn. And in fact, if you look at where it's highlighted there, I could type in the dimension right away. But if I don't type in the dimension, That's okay. I can left click and then go to dimension and then dimension it. To dimension the distance between this, I just click on this line and then this one, and then I can type in the dimension. I usually move my mouse away so I can better read the dimensions so they're not like right over a line that I'm trying to draw. So I'll move it over here, left click, and then type in 0.75 inches. Now, if there's ever a dimension you want to change, all you have to do is double click and that brings that up and you can edit all of those dimensions. So if you type in one wrong, no worries. Next, I'm going to just hit the line button and close everything up. So I'm going to be careful that my cursor kind of snaps into the end of that line. Click, and then I'm going to do the same here. Make sure it closes that off. And then I'm going to do the same here. So now that I've closed this entire loop here, I'm going to hit Finish Sketch, and I can extrude this out into 3 dimensions. So if I hit the Extrude button, it kind of punches that out into a 3rd dimension. And over here, I can set the distance, or I can set the distance here. By default, it's 1 inch. I'm going to change it to 1/4 of an inch, so 0.25. And there we go. We can also extrude away from us, or we can have a symmetric extrude, much like what we saw in Onshape. So it really doesn't matter for this part. I'm just going to leave the default at coming toward me, and then I'm going to hit OK. So now we have the outline of the part. What we need to do is add the holes and add the filleted corners. To add the holes, what I'm going to do is actually hit the Sketch button here and click on this face. And now this will allow me to do some drawings on the face that I've extruded. There's a number of ways to do holes, but I'm going to use a point, and I'm going to click and make a point, and I'm going to dimension that point to the center of the first hole. And so I'm going to hit dimension, click here on the point, click here on this edge, and I know that that distance needs to be 0.25 inches. So I hit 0.25, hit enter. Now I want to make sure that this point is centered on this vertical line. I can just go here and dimension that to be 0.375. And that's one way to do it. But I wanted to show you a different way. So I'm going to delete that dimension. What I can do is use a horizontal constraint. And if I click on the horizontal constraint and click on this point, then go over to this line and move my mouse until this point over here shows up, that point is at the center of that vertical line, or the middle point. What that does, that horizontal constraint, ensures that these 2 points are always horizontal to one another. And that is what we want, because we want this point to be at the center of the vertical line here. And the reason why I like doing that is because if I ever changed this dimension from 3/4 of an inch to like a 1/2 inch or 1 inch, it would always be centered. So now I'm going to hit Finish Sketch and hit the Hole button. And what that does is usually auto selects the points that I've already created in the sketch. And we can see that it's making a hole, a simple hole with no seat. Remember, a seat is like a countersink or a counterbore countersink, but we don't have that. We're just going straight through. And we're going all the way through. And the diameter is 0.17. The reason why it has 0.17 for me is because the last hole I made had that same diameter. And so Inventor uses the same hole type and the hole diameter that you used in the previous hole that you made. And so you're going to have to make sure that yours is 0.17. Once I have that, I can just hit OK. Now you might say, why didn't I make 4 points for the 4 holes or 8 points for the 8 holes? And I'm going to show you how to do like a rectangular pattern and a reflection to maximize some of the symmetry here. So we know that we have 4 holes all in a line, 1/2 inch apart. So if I hit the rectangular pattern button here, I can make a pattern of this hole. And so the first thing it's asking for is what do you want to make a pattern of? What feature or features? What we want to do is this hole. So I can click here, or I could go over here and click. And that selects the hole that I want to make a pattern of. The next thing I'm going to do is hit the direction. which way do I want to make the pattern? And I need to select a line, and I want it to be basically along this direction where I've highlighted this line. So I'm going to go here, click once, and you can see that it's making a hole in the wrong direction. You can see that arrow is pointing to the left. I want it the other way, and so I can flip that direction. Now the spacing is wrong because the spacing is supposed to be a 1/2 inch, not 1 inch. And the number of instances is 4 instead of 2. So now I have 4 holes along that one direction, and so I can hit OK, and it makes those 4 holes. One tip that I've been using and I haven't explained is how to rotate the part not without using the orbit button. And it's Shift and middle mouse. And while you're holding your middle mouse, you can move the part around. And I use that all of the time to get different views. And the nice thing is when I let go, it undoes that and it's not rotating anymore. I don't have to hit escape. Like if I want to get out of this orbit, I have to hit escape. So using the Shift middle mouse is really handy. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a plane that I can mirror these 4 holes about. And that plane needs to go right through these 2 vertices here, these 2 points. So what I'm going to do is on the drop down under plane, I'm going to choose this option. I'm going to create a mid-plane between 2 planes. What that does is it's asking for 2 planes, and once you select 2 planes, it's going to make a 3rd plane that is in between that or in the middle of that. And we call that a mid-plane. So what I'm doing is orbiting. And I'm going to select this edge here, or that plane, and then I'm going to select this plane here, and notice that it creates a mid-plane between those 2, right through those 2 vertices. Now what I want to do is I want to mirror those 4 points, or those 4 holes about the mirror plane. To do that, right by the rectangular pattern is the mirror feature. And now it's asking me what features I want to mirror, and it's these holes. So I can go here and actually select them, or I can go over here and select them. Basically, I want to mirror the hole and the pattern of those, so all 4. Then it says, what mirror plane do you want to mirror about? Well, that's the plane I made. So I'm going to click mirror plane here, and then select the plane. Again, I can select it here, or I can select it here. Anything that I'm designing here on the right in the picture shows up here on the left. Okay, and so I want to select this plane. Once I do that, it gives me a preview of where the holes are going to be. That looks right, and so I'm going to hit OK. So now I have those holes in the correct location. I don't like looking at the plane, and so I can right-click on it, and the drop-down, there's a visibility, and I can uncheck that by clicking, and it hides that plane. So then the final thing that we really need to do is just create the filleted corners. And so creating the filleted corners, I need 1/8 inch. And so if I click on each of these, I can orbit, clicking each of these, and I can create the filleted corners. By default, the radius is an 1/8 inch, what the drawing shows. And there we go. Again, there's not just one way to design the part, but I've tried to design it in a way that maximizes symmetry and uses best practices. When you're done, you shouldn't have any extra sketches that aren't being used and things like this. Notice any sketch that I created is consumed by some operation, whether it's the first sketch I made for the extrusion or the second sketch I made for the holes. They kind of are subsets now of those features that I created.